What's up everyone, Taiki here, and today I want to give an update to my Maker trade. If you like the content, please like and subscribe and check out the premium Discord. I post 3 videos every single week and I share my portfolio in real time. It's been 5.5 months. I'm still aggressively long Maker. It's been a pretty stressful experience, right? A lot of people are calling me a mid-curve, and I don't disagree, but I do want to, give my reasons on why I still believe in the trade, and why I bought more actually. So this is just one of my wallets, and the trade I've essentially put on was buy a lot of Maker, right? Use it as collateral, borrow more stable coins, buy more Maker, and effectively lever long, right? And I think so this was a month and a half ago or so. I mentioned that I'm like roughly 1.95x long with a cost basis of 1374. But I did, I unfortunately, I bought the top again. I have bought more Maker, increased my cost basis. Not too much, right? Not too much, but now I'm over 2.02x long Maker at a cost basis of 1400. Of course, because Maker, or because I was like buying a lot, right? When the markets were trading lower, it's not like, I would get liquidated, right? Or I'm at like a fairly low risk of liquidation. But I did buy more and my cost basis keeps going up. It has been, if you look at this chart, it looks fine, right? It's mostly slightly grinding up. But if you look at the Maker ETH chart, this is like the very difficult part, right? Because I bought Maker with the expectation that it's going to outperform Ethereum, and it has, right? But it's been significantly lagging recently, and this is right a point of concern because I'm not even like that bullish Ethereum, honestly. So if I'm taking on more risk and I'm underperforming Ethereum, then my risk-adjusted returns are not that great. Of course, like I said, I am taking on like leverage, so my USD returns are fairly good. But from a trade perspective, it's like when you take on a lot more risk and you get like similar rewards as like the majors, then it's very, very concerning. So today I do want to give a few updates because a lot has happened since my last video, and I do want to share why, I guess a few thoughts on like why I think it has underperformed, or a few hypotheses, and why I still remain a mid-curve, coping mid-curve, whatever words you want to use to describe my current mental state. I want to explain like why I'm still there, right? So if you think back to my original Maker thesis, I started talking about Maker around February, and I've been just like basically almost buying every single month, right? Just like dollar cost averaging. I definitely agree. Like my the buys in July definitely kind of irresponsible. But I think the buys I made February, March, April, May, June, fairly like all right. And when I first came up with this thesis, I had this idea that, well, Maker is one of the, or I think it's like a top 3 profitable DeFi protocol, right? Because they like just print money, and I just thought that the market was underappreciating how much money it was already making, and how much profits was like being plowed back into the token in the form of buybacks. But also the TG, right? This token generation event for the Spark token, I thought would be a really bullish event that would send Maker much higher, and just like the price for Spark, basically how it goes, if you are like new to my channel and whatnot, Spark, right, is this DeFi protocol. Whoops, let me pull this up here. Spark is a DeFi protocol that has many billions in TVL, right? The Ethereum Foundation has deployed capital in this Spark. So like generally, like these metrics. Actually, let me move my face so you can get to see it. Right, it's been fairly up only, and it was incubated by Maker, right, aka Sky, and Sky owns roughly 65% of the tokens for Spark. So if you go to the Spark token, right, 65% of the supply is allocated to Genesis farming, and what that means is all the supply is only going to go to people that stake USDS, which is the stablecoin for Sky, or staking the governance token, or staking Sky essentially. Maker rebranded the Sky, they're the same token. So right now, the Spark farm on Ethereum mainnet, it's paying roughly 8.5%, and it's paying or the TVL is like roughly 1.2 billion or so, right, as you can see here. And I thought, right, or the general hypothesis was that when the Spark farming goes live, it should just pump profits because, like all the backing, right, or basically all the stable coins that's like going into this particular farm, Maker can just print like profits, right, at a zero cost off of the backing. And I mentioned that, or this, when was this? This was like May, right? So I hypothesized that, the Spark farm would increase profits for the parent DAO, right, Sky, by roughly $80 million, which was like my hypothesis. And, recently, as you can see, this is the dashboard here, but this kind of looks at the estimated profits for Sky. And I guess you can kind of zoom in here. May, like when I said May, it was like roughly, what is it, like, like basically 100 mil, right? Maker was making like 100 mil like per year, roughly. And now, right, after Spark is launched, it's been some time, it's roughly at 227. So the closer number is roughly 200 million because this doesn't take into account Sky token expenses, right? Because there's some Sky that goes into the paying people and whatnot. So I mean, that hypothesis has been correct, right? The profits have, it's kind of exceeded my expectations because I thought it would go from like roughly 100 to like 150, 175, 180, and now it's like roughly 200 million. And with how the tokenomics are designed, half of the profits goes into buybacks. I guess you can actually go here, info.sky.money, look at, like the Sky buyback section, and, it's buying back tokens, right? Like roughly $5,000 of tokens, roughly 47 minutes or so, 46 minutes. And the other half goes into stakers. So I think it's this tab. Sorry, I have many tabs open, so I need to like find it here. So $200,000 of the profits goes into buybacks, and then $200,000 goes into people that stake Sky. And of course, right, as a result of like the sub-DAO farming, right, you can also stake Sky to earn Spark. And like I said, right, Maker, Sky, same token. It's just part of the rebrand. In theory, right, like my hypothesis is like, okay, like I expect, right, the profits to hit like roughly, 200 million. And when I first started buying the Maker token, right? When I first started buying the Maker token, it was trading at roughly $1 billion valuation, right? So I'm like, okay, like, mathematically, I just can't see this thing trading much lower from a fundamental basis. And if I expect earnings growth for this particular DeFi token, then I think the market will generally like, it could potentially catch a narrative, especially, given the backdrop of, the Genius bill, right? The stablecoin bill, right? Going into account. And maybe there's going to be a growth story because, maybe I can expect some stablecoin supply growth, which, it's grown by like roughly $1 billion, which isn't that much in the grand scheme of things. But anyways, like that's basically like all the reasons for like why I have justified like longing a lot of Maker, and why I've basically only talked about Maker on my channel for like the past 5.5 months, because I just felt like it was like such like an obvious opportunity, right? And typically in crypto, I want to long assets that the market is underappreciating, that will have an obvious narrative that will look obvious in hindsight, right? And my strength historically in crypto has been longing DeFi assets, and just like sizing up and then making money that way. So obviously in USD terms, I have made money, and I'm grateful that I've made money, right? I think comparison, or in markets, comparison is the thief of joy. You can always find someone that's like doing better than you, but I think it's very hard to make money in markets to begin with. So I generally am grateful that it has panned out in my favor, right? Because I have taken a lot of risk, and I have been rewarded for that risk with USD profits. But obviously, if I told you, or if you asked me in February, right, when I first started like buying Maker, that all these things would be happening and it would be trading at $2,000, I would have been like very disappointed, right? And I am disappointed, honestly, right? That it's only trading at $2,000, because like I thought, right? Going back to like this tab, I'm gonna ignore like the post-election pump. Because like there's like a lot of murky things happening, right? After the election, so I'm going to ignore like this particular, profit pump here. But the last time, profits were like roughly at 200 million was around March of 2024. And March 2024, we were trading at roughly $4,000, right? And my goal, right, or like my vision for the trade was always, that if I am right, then we should easily exceed, these levels, because obviously as the protocol matures, as all these sub DAOs, like things like Spark gets going, it should, the market should, develop more confidence in the token. But I guess like that really hasn't happened yet. So yeah, let me think about like a few reasons. And I've written this down so I don't forget. Like a few reasons, right? Potential reasons for like why this potentially may be happening. And I can go from like more optimistic to pessimistic, right? So reason number one, maybe the markets are inefficient, right? Typically, I don't really believe in inefficient markets. Of course, crypto is fairly like inefficient relative to like equities, but I think generally, a good rule of thumb to have is to just assume that every available information out there is somewhat reflected in the price, and that way, if you watch some like random YouTube video or like some like Twitter thread on like why this token is going to pump, right? Generally, like you shouldn't really expect to like that. You can't really expect that to be alpha, right? So even like my videos, right? I think I've given like my reasonings for like why all these things that I've like just talked about wasn't reflected in price, but like maybe it was reflected in price, right? Okay, I said I would start optimistic, right? And the optimistic view is that the market just hasn't caught on yet, and it's gonna just eventually just go up, right? And because the protocol is buying back the token, like naturally it should just like drift upwards, right? Which it has been. So second reason, the market doesn't care, right? And I guess like one way to view the markets is it's often like a popularity contest, right? And obviously this is like a mid-curve way to think about it, but sometimes an asset just doesn't. The participants in the market, they have a certain bias for certain assets, and they just don't care, right, for particular assets because it's just like not that exciting. And Maker, right, is objectively not that exciting of an asset if you're not Taiki Maeda, right? If your name is not Taiki Maeda, so maybe it like doesn't really care, and the market's not gonna care until the buybacks start going up. So the amount of money that gets plowed back into the token. So like I mentioned earlier, $400,000 is going into the token, $200,000 in the form of buybacks, and then $200,000 in the form of staking yield. But given like the recent surge in profits of like, let's say it's like $200 million, technically, right? They can plow like roughly $550,000 back into token, and still have it be a sustainable program. So it's up to the team to decide whether they want to do it or not. And also, right, the earnings should continue to grow, because where the earnings growth comes from primarily is from Spark, right? As you can see, Spark is basically like this on-chain hedge fund in a sense. Obviously, they're also like an Aave fork, but what they do is they essentially borrow money from Maker or / Sky. So right now, Spark has borrowed $3.6 billion from Sky, earning a 7.2% yield. So this is, from Sparkland, Morpho, Athena, right? So they're basically capturing on-chain rates. And right now, Spark is paying Maker roughly a 5.2% borrow fee. So Spark has borrowed $3.6 billion at a 5.2% rate, and they are earning 7.2%, and they capture the spread. So let's say that's like a 2% spread on like $3.6 million. That's like $70 million in earnings, right? Just ballpark math here. But of course, Sky can easily just increase this to like 6.2%, right? Because Spark is willing and able, right, to pay that yield. And hypothetically, if they were to like charge them more, right, an additional 1%, then the profits will go up by 1% times 3.6, or $36.5 million, which will then, right, go back into the token. And then let's just like assume like let's just say it goes up by like $40 million, right? Then they can like plow roughly, $2/3 of $1 million back into the token. But none of this is happening, right? So like maybe the market just like is waiting for, these profits to be plowed back into the token. But until then, they don't care. So that's reason number two. Reason number three, like maybe the market doesn't believe that this earnings growth is sustainable, which is reasonable, right? You can't really expect, rates to be like super high for a long time. And, part of the earnings growth is also being driven by the sub-DAO farming, right? Because if the Spark token, right, if this thing goes down, it's down like 11%, but it's gone up a lot, right? Since the token generation event. If this token dumps, then, there's going to be less demand for the stablecoin, right, to farm this thing, because the yield is being paid in like the token, right? So maybe the market just like doesn't believe that the current valuation of Spark is sustainable, and then therefore, like, you can't really expect the current profits to also be sustainable. That's number three. Number four, right? Maybe the Spark token is cannibalizing value capture from Maker. I've heard this argument, right? And there's a lot of people that believe that whenever a project launches new tokens, it kind of dilutes, right? A lot of the value capture. I thought that this wouldn't really be the case because, like I said, right, every like sub-DAO or every new project that comes out of Maker, 60 to 70% of the supply goes to like the parent DAO, right, which goes into like sub-DAO farming, right, which naturally grows earnings, and also for Spark to make money, they must also pay money to Sky, and of course, Spark gets like more upside as a result. And I don't really have like a strong opinion on this, right? It's more like a hypothesis. I thought it wouldn't really be the case, but like maybe we're kind of seeing that now, where Spark is worth roughly $900 million FDV, and Maker is worth $2 billion. I don't really have a good way to value Spark, if I were to be completely honest. Noah, who is a fellow mid-curve, he's a buddy of mine. He kind of came up with this analysis, and he's at the Air Research, that he expects that maybe Spark should be worth somewhere around 25% of Sky. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because we're all like just guessing there. Maybe that means that Spark is overvalued, or maybe Maker is relatively undervalued. I have no idea, right? But maybe the market is waiting for, like whether or not this pump is sustainable, and like what is like the fair value of Spark, because like no one really knows. And that's reason number four. And the reason number five, it's GG, right? As in it's fucked, right? It's over. I'm wrong. Taiki's wrong. I need to capitulate. I think ever since I clicked record for this particular video, the price has gone down. If you look at the 1 minute chart, right? Taiki starts recording, boom, right? Market dump. There are some, those are the reasons, right? Optimistically, right? Maybe the markets are inefficient, right? Maybe people lost a bunch of money, right? Longing the pump fund token, and then, there's less money to go around elsewhere. Number two, maybe the market doesn't care until like the buyback amount goes up. Number three, maybe this is all fugazi, right? The market doesn't care, right? And like this earnings growth is not sustainable. Number four, Spark is bad for the Maker token because of reasons XYZ, yada. Or number five, I'm just stupid, right? So all those reasons could be true. I'm not 100% sure, but as a student of markets, right? If the market isn't really responding the way you want it to, right, despite the fundamentals improving, then, if I see the world as glass full, then it's like, oh, wow, what a fantastic opportunity, right, like to buy the dip or something. But also, right, if the market should be aware that all these things are happening, and if the market doesn't view these things as attractive, right, then perhaps I do have to look inwards, and eventually just admit that I am wrong. And honestly, right, I try to be self-aware, right? I try to be, I try to have humility, right, and like all that stuff. And I've mentioned this in the Discord and whatnot, but I've given myself until like the end of July, right, which is like, we're like literally at the end of July, to like reevaluate my thesis. And like if this earnings growth wasn't happening, right, I think I would easily be able to like just capitulate, but it's just like so hard to like just capitulate like once like the thesis is like getting underway, and like it is kind of like a bag holder mentality, right, like a coping mentality, but I just have a hard time like just fully capitulating like once, because like the earnings have gone parabolic, right, and obviously it's not gonna go parabolic forever, but I mean, the fundamentals are improving, right? So, it should, in theory, be reflected in the price. But like also like maybe it's not going to be reflected in the price until, the team decides to like, ramp up buybacks. Or in maybe the market thinks that this is like a dead token, right? Which could also be the case. So yeah, that's kind of like where my head is at. I don't really have like a perfect answer, honestly, right? In fact, like no one should have a perfect answer when it comes to markets. The markets are very hard. I'm experiencing that right now. I guess like the final thought I'll leave here with is, I guess like the one thing I've always recommended, like you guys, like my subscribers, like whoever, right, is to always like study your past trades and then take lessons from them, right? Like what kind of mistakes have you made in the past, right? And also like what have you historically made a lot of money in the past, and then just like repeat that process, right? Because obviously we all want to be good at everything, but chances are, we're good at a few things, we're bad at like other things, but how you consistently make money is to like just keep pounding whatever like edge you have, right? And I mentioned this before, but historically when it comes to like Ethereum based DeFi apps, I typically have like a good grasp of how these tokens move, and I typically tend to get really good entries, but I end up selling too early, right? So July 2023, if you look at my channel, and I mean all this is public, right, on my YouTube channel, so you can kind of observe this. But I put a third of my portfolio into MKR here, and then I think my average sell price was like roughly 2K, right? So I made money, but then I missed out on the last parabolic move. In the case of, so that was 2023. In 2024, in July, I bought Aave at like $90. I sold at like somewhere around here, right? And then it ended up like going parabolic later. And then also the other token in 2024 was Uniswap. I think I like bought here, and then I sold like roughly here, so like I made a little bit of money, and then it's like went parabolic. And I think the reason this happens is because I just get like way too impatient, right? And obviously it's easy to like look back in hindsight and be like, oh wow, I should have just held a few more weeks or a few more months or whatever, right? But the reason I sold early is because it just felt like I was like underperforming, and then I kind of capitulated early. And like the emotions I'm feeling now was basically like the same emotions I felt like here, where I was kind of happy that the markets were going up, but I just felt like what, like if we're in a bull market, like why am I holding like such like a like a mid curve token, right? And then I like ended up like buying something else, and then I would have been much better off to like just holding on to this thing, and also right, just like sizing up a lot earlier. It's better to like size up early when there's like less certainty than to like size up like later in the trend, right? And I still think that there's upside in the trade. I could be wrong, obviously, right? But I'm just trying to be honest. The metrics suggest that we should go higher, but we're not. Therefore, either something is wrong with this token, which very well like might be, right? Or the market just needs more time to digest the move or whatever, right? I guess like a few other catalysts, so I mean, I guess like Maker and Sky, it's like one of those tokens that the market, right, the community has very little trust in the team to execute, and I'm still kind of like in that camp, but I feel like that sentiment is also like already in the price. Rune, the founder, kind of posted this like a week ago, and I'm not gonna like spend too much time on this, but basically like, the goal is to cut costs by end of year, because if you look back to the profits, right? The expenses are like very, very high, right? For like such a simple protocol. And, I've kind of justified it, right? In the sense that they're spending a lot of money to like, for growth, right? And we're kind of seeing like the results of that growth. But still like, this is like way too high, like 123. And, Rune, a few days ago, told me that, by end of year, the fixed expenses should go down by like roughly $70 to $90 million per year, which is a good thing, right? And a lot of money has been plowed into this project in the past 1-2 years. But as the fruits of their labor takes effect, maybe like the costs can go down. I'm not sure if I believe this honestly, right? But I mean that's what he said, so like let's just like take that at face value. And also Spark, like I said, is a sub DAO that is doing like the sub DAO farming. The next star that's coming is Grove, which is basically like an RWA oriented star. So they're in charge of capturing off-chain rates, and they've already aped like $1 billion into like RWAs, like real world assets. And you know, like they're paying like, you know, Sky 4.2%, and they're paying $50 million back to the DAO. So I'm not, like, you know, at some point they're going to do a TGE, and then you can like, you know, stake USDS in Sky, like farm this thing, which should also like be good for like profits and whatnot. But I mean, you know, it's, I'm not sure when they're going to TGE. I'm not really sure how excited the market is going to be. So, you know, there you have it. So let's see how, okay, this video is 25. Okay, let me wrap up the video. So, you know, I still like the token. I still own the token for all the reasons I mentioned. You know, but I can't like just be so like gung-ho and like be tunnel visioned into this token forever. So, you know, I'm not really sure what it would take for me to sell, but I do have to be open to selling, you know, at some point in the future, because I don't want to be like one of those guys that like, keeps holding the token for like 2 years, right? Because they just like, because they live in the past, right? It's like, oh, like, you know, I still believe in this token, and then like the market share is like down only, or like, you know, the metrics are down only. It's hard to do because the metrics have been going up only, you know, in a sense, but, you know, anyone can come up with reasons to not sell a token. Anyone can come up with reasons to like buy a token. And I understand that I'm doing that, but I still think that I'm still bullish, right? I'm still bullish. And I think it's one of those tokens where like, yeah, like if it does go up like to new highs or something, right? Or like, you know, if it goes up like 2-3x, right? Like it's going to be like fairly obvious, right? It's like, okay, like it's a DeFi protocol, Ethereum is going up, Genius Act, you know, earnings are growing, token gets value accrual. Yeah, like, you know, it was so obvious or something, right? But like maybe there's just like so little speculative capital in the markets, right? Given that there's not really like that much retail that's come back to the markets, that maybe there's just like not enough money to like pump this thing. And even if there is, like maybe, you know, I'm missing something. But anyways, that's gonna be it for me. Thank you guys for this joy or watching through this video. If you're interested in more content, check out the premium Discord. I post 3 videos every single day, share my portfolio in real time. Honestly, right? All I do is talk about DeFi stuff and like, you know, sometimes like trenching stuff, but you know, yeah, I mean, if you're interested, check it out. If not, like that's totally fine, right? I'm glad we're all able to ride this mid-curve journey, and hopefully, right, we are in this mid-curve meta where mid-curves like me can even make money. But if not, I fell for it again, right? I fell for it again. Anyways, thank you guys. See you guys later. Bye.